I've officially started writing my next book on free-to-play design, and it made me realize I don't think we've actually had a sit-down discussion here as to what is a live service game. So for our critical thought today, we're going to talk about this and why it's one of the highest risks and highest rewarding genres in the industry. "865 years ago, before the invention of Steam and digital distribution, video games were released very much as a standalone title. The game comes out, and with exception to bug fixes and maybe the occasional expansion, that game was done. You were not going to see any new content developed, and developers were going to either move on to the next game, or in some unfortunate circumstances, they would just close. But with the boom of the MMO period, and then following that, the success of Team Fortress and League of Legends, we began to see this shift towards live service thanks to digital distribution, and just this idea of trying to sustain a game longer. So when we talk about a live service game, we're referring to developing a game with the intention of having post-release support not just for weeks, but sometimes months or years after that initial release. Most cases in a live service game, that game will fundamentally be different from day 1 to month 8 to year 10 in some circumstances. And it really has fundamentally changed, not just how developers create video games, but also the expectations from consumers. In today's market, it very much seems like if you are even thinking or considering making a multiplayer-based game, you're also developing a live service game whether you like it or not. The advantage of live service for consumers is that it allows them to play their favorite games, well, a lot longer. And if you enjoy Game A, and Game A gets 5 years of more content and things for you to do, well, that seems like a win-win for you, doesn't it? Now, when it comes to developers, as I said in the first part, this is high risk, high reward. From a reward standpoint, when a live service game blows up, we are talking Fortnite, Team Fortress, Fall Guys, Among Us, and so on, these games very much become a license to print money for their respective studios. There's a lot about kind of the pop culture effect on live service games. When we see collaborations between major brands, celebrity endorsements, or even getting celebrities in their games. What it all adds up to, though, is more recognition. So more recognition brings more money, so they spend more money on getting more collabs, which means getting more money. And the circle of capitalism goes round and round again. When these games get to that level of success, they become a brand unto themselves. And that is a very important point I want you to keep in the back of your minds for part 2 of this video, as I want to talk about the differences between a fan of a genre and a fan of a brand/property, because it is a very big deal in this case. Now, with that said, when these games do reach that level of success, another big avenue for developers is that it mitigates the risks of game development. As we've said many times over, game dev is inherently risky. You are making a product with no, concrete explanation or idea if people are going to enjoy it or not. And if we're talking about AAA development, you have costs easily in the millions. And that's a lot of money to throw onto a possible success. This is why publishers have really grown to love sequels. Because if you know X amount of people bought game 1, well, maybe X amount of people are going to at least buy game number 2, or 5, or 15th, or whatever. With a live service game, you are developing one game. That's it. That is going to be your one game for until you run out of ideas or people run out of money. And it's far easier to support a game like that as opposed to keep coming up with new sequels and new concepts. But even with that said, some of the more successful live service games like Path of Exile and Warframe have added in completely new systems and elements to their games over their years of success. And it's very rare to see a live service game get a full-on sequel. As in, this version of the game we're not playing anymore, and we're moving to this version. Even Team Fortress, after over a decade, never got a sequel. They did get engine enhancements. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, of course, if we're talking about success or the rewards of live service, the amount of money these games bring in is huge. This was one of the reasons why a lot of developers went the multiplayer route over the last decade, because you can't really do live service in a single player atmosphere. If a single player game is 8 to 10 hours, well, it's 8 to 10 hours. Anything that you're adding to that is just going to be more of that same core gameplay. And this is why a lot of live service games have gone multiplayer route, because multiplayer provides player-generated content. Again, players versus players is an almost infinite well of content for a game. Whereas, player versus environment, you beat it one time, you're done. Now, it is a lot of work. And like I said, when it comes to live service, you are not going to be thinking about your game in terms of, we're going to do 3 to 5 months of patches, or maybe 1 year of DLC. No, this is a multi-year project. And you will have to adapt based on the needs and changes of the community. When Payday 2 was first released, I think that was 2013, 2014, somewhere around there, they originally planned, I think it was 1 to 2 years of post-release support. That soon turned to 3 to 4 years, which then became 5 to 6 years. And they are still supporting the game right now. I believe they are officially working on Payday 3. And with these kinds of live service products, you have to be thinking about the future. Again, when you release your game at 1.0, you still have to be thinking about what else is coming. Because consumers, if they even have a whiff that your game is done content-wise, they're out here. And they're going to go to the next game or the next major live service title. And you see, this is where the risks of live service comes in. You are not just developing a game, again, under the guise of hitting 1.0 and then you're done. You need to think about what 1.0 of your game is going to look like, and you need to be planning the next few months and, like I said, even the next few years of support. Because if you're caught with your pants down in this respect, you are going to basically shred a lot of potential value of your game. This is what we saw what happened with Among Us, that when it got its incredibly, lightning strikes 15 times luck of blowing up about a year ago, they didn't know what to do with it. They were busy working on Among Us 2. And it caught them completely by surprise, and they've had to play catch-up to their own success. And I am sure that has caused a lot of churn and a lot of that initial wave of support to go away. And like I said at the start, this is why, if you are considering any kind of online multiplayer based experience today, you also have to be considering what is its live service version. Because people don't want to play a game these days, multiplayer-wise I should say, that is going to be 2 fixed maps, 3 characters, and you're done. People want to see that growth. They want to see that the game they enjoy is getting better. With that said, there's another risk. What happens if it gets worse? Because we've seen developers step on their own toes when it comes to updates and making their games fundamentally worse in some respect. Payday 2, as I mentioned earlier, had the infamous loot crate or loot box disaster when they tried to introduce that to their titles. And Another point about live service is that because you are changing and adding more things to it, you could mess up. And there's definitely been concerns about, if I like your game at 1.0, am I going to like playing it 6 months down the line, 2 years down the line? There was concern from some people regarding Team Fortress 2 and how the inclusion of side grades and cosmetics and hats, and I think they had their own pass system for the man versus machine mode. A lot of people felt that it wasn't the same game they played at 1.0. And like I said, that is the major element of a live service game. If your game is exactly the same way it was at 1.0 after year, 5 years, 8 years of content, then you're not really supporting that game right. But the other problem, again, with this is that you have to not only release your game with a stable foundation, but you have to plan for that future. And unfortunately, that means investing even more money in at the start. And if your live service game doesn't blow up right at the start, it can be a downward spiral very quickly. Because if you've planned 2 years of support and nobody's playing your game, well, those 2 years are now just wasted time and energy. And it's again why there is that boom and bust of the MMO genre. And why we've even seen similar elements with live service games, especially those all trying to be the next Fortnite, the next Among Us, the next PUBG, the next Fall Guys, and so on and so forth. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to explore more about that mistake that developers and publishers have made. And again, why there is a difference between a fan of a genre and a fan of a brand or company or studio. But if you're interested in my thoughts on design, then be sure to check out the following books. For entry-level students, we have 20 Essential Games to Study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with free-to-play coming in 2022. Alright, we're back with me. No gameplay footage, just a different shirt for the back half of this video, because it's serious time to talk about one of the major traps that has befallen many developers and publishers since the explosion when it comes to live service, and something that I hinted out in the last part, and that's the difference between a fan of a property and brand and a fan of a specific genre. The game industry is one of the rarer ones when it comes to the differences between indirect and direct competition. As a developer, you are not really directly competing with other developers and studios in terms of your game designs. If I buy one platformer, that doesn't mean I'm never going to buy another platformer again for the rest of my life. It's not the same as someone going to a car dealership and saying, I'm going to buy this one, but, just be on the safe side, give me these other 6-7 cars as well, I'll buy them as well. If anyone has a disposable income for that, please throw some of that my way. But when we talk about live service, this is direct competition. And the reason is that one of the major aspects of a live service game is that they are meant to be replayed constantly. Retention is a huge point, again, about the success or failure of a live service game in today's market. Developers don't want you to be playing once a month, a few hours a week maybe. They want you to be playing this daily. They want their game to become part of your daily routine, because that's how they build long-term engagement and give that added weight to the game. You can't quit playing. You've played 500 hours, 1,200 hours. You've spent $50, $500, $10,000 on this game. And the point is that with all that time and all that money spent, we're still living in a world where there's only 24 hours in a day. If your gameplay loop takes 3 hours to go through all the daily challenges and grind and whatnot, I can't just then say, okay, let me get 3 more hours today so I can play another live service game, or another. And this is the lesson when it comes to the differing markets. With World of Warcraft, many developers were trying to compete directly with it. They thought to themselves, okay, World of Warcraft was bringing in at its height 10 to 12 million subscribers monthly. So that must mean that the MMO genre is 10 to 12 million consumers strong, right? And surely we can get a quarter, an eighth of that with our game, then we'll be rich. It's just that simple, right? No, it's not. Instead, what developers learned was that those 10 to 12 million consumers who are subscribed to World of Warcraft monthly, they're not MMOG fans. They're World of Warcraft fans. And everyone else who was trying to compete with World of Warcraft found a vastly, vastly smaller market of consumers to play. Basically, the only two groups of people that were left were the people who hated World of Warcraft and the people who wanted an MMO but didn't want the World of Warcraft gameplay loop. Which is not good because a lot of developers were trying to copy World of Warcraft directly. And I'm sure we all remember all their names, right? But the developers who survived and were able to thrive to some capacity, they did this with one very simple thing. They stayed as far the heck away from World of Warcraft's audience and designs as they could. This is where we got stuff like Star Trek Online, City of Heroes, EVE Online, Second Life, and there's, I think, a few other ones I'm forgetting right now. But this lesson gets repeated with every major genre, every game that blows up like this. That if you try to compete directly with another game, especially another live service game, most likely you are going to fail. Because like we've said, you're not just competing with that game. You're competing with that game that has had months or years of patches, refinements, updates, collaborations, money spent, and so on and so forth. But there's another point about this, and this again feeds into the idea of the brand becoming its own major entity. When we see these games that blow up, Team Fortress, Fortnite, Among Us, and so on, they become household names. They become a part of the popular or the pop culture zeitgeist. There's an entire generation of kids whose most memorable experience is probably playing Minecraft, or Roblox, or Fortnite. They remember getting those custom skins or making their first game. And that kind of devotion and fandom, you can't replicate. You can't iterate on a design to get that. And that's, again, a huge point. I'm sure that it is possible to design a game that is mechanically and system-wise better than World of Warcraft, or Fortnite, or Among Us, or Fall Guys, or whatever. But can you design a game that will have the brand recognition and fandom of those games? And the answer is no. This is when we get to that, if you're trying to force it, that Steve Buscemi meme of, how do you do, fellow kids? And again, this is where we get the lucrative side of these live service games. Why the collaborations are such a big deal. Because if you're big enough to get Rick and Morty or Ariana Grande or Marvel, DC, whatever in your game, that's going to attract more recognition. It will pull more people into this game. And that pulling in, once again, gives these games more weight compared to other ones in the market. Yes, someone, again, could make a better Fortnite. But could they make a better Fortnite that also features collaborations between Naruto, that they're now in the game at the time of this recording? Who knows what the actual collaboration will be if you're watching this video in the future? And this is why it's so risky to develop these games. Because the market for these games is not the same when we talk about indirect competition. If you are trying to be the next Slay the Spire, or the next Fortnite, or whatever, you are going to be competing directly with those games. And while you could turn out a better game mechanically speaking, in terms of the place within pop culture, you're never going to be able to compete with that unless you somehow go, 100 times above and beyond anything else in that game. Like we saw what Fortnite did when it surpassed PUBG. And when these games get to this level, when they become their own brand, their own entity in the marketplace, that's when we get to that license to print money level. Where, you can just call up Disney and go, hey, we want Frozen characters in our game. Let's have it for the next 3 months. Thanks, goodbye. Incidentally, when we hit 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube, I'm going to call Disney and be like, hey, this is Josh Bycer. Yes, that Josh Bycer. I want a cameo in your next movie. Make it happen. And I'm sure that's how that entire conversation will go, right? But the risks of live service are, for a lot of people, often outweighed by the rewards. Again, if you can make the first game of a new genre and it blows up like Dead by Daylight, or it is the best example of a type of genre like with Among Us or something like Fall Guys, that gives you value that, beyond what money can buy. When you are the sole, element of the genre, when people can look at MMOs and they think, well, it had to be World of Warcraft. That's how it was in the early 2000s. Or people think of social games and they think, oh, well, it's Among Us. That level of brand awareness and recognition, it pretty much puts that studio on easy street for a very long time. The only way you're going to fail at that level is if you commit so many unforced errors that you just completely decimate your entire fan base because of it. And it can happen. We've seen, I saw that with World of Warcraft, that numbers have been declining a lot since its heyday. I think they're down to only a little over 2.5 million subscribers monthly. Which again, for a lot of people, they would probably kill for that number, right? But to end our discussion for today, live service is a very much an all or nothing genre. You either are going to succeed and you're going to put all this time, money, resources in to make it blow up, like Riot Games did with League of Legends, or it's not for one reason or another, and unfortunately, most likely, it will lead to a studio being closed, because the investment into these games is massive. Now, as kind of a small bit of good news, because how much live service has been adopted by other genres, it's not just MMOs anymore. That was one of the major issues of the 2000s and the early 2010s, that the only studios who could even possibly fathom to build a live service game were also building an MMO, and MMOs are one of the most expensive genres to do. Again, today we have party games, we have social games, we have crazy platformers and asymmetrical horror. It is possible for a team who knows what they're doing to capitalize on a very specific element or a very specific focus on the market. Because again, you can't compete with the top dogs. There's a reason why nobody else has tried to out Warframe. Because it's still going strong, it has a hugely passionate fan base, and they're making a lot of money off of it. And again, the chance of somebody being able to outdo all that over, let's say, 3 to 5 years of development of a game, it's just not going to happen. And that's where the MMO bust came from, with developers spending millions of dollars and years of development, and all they were left with was a worser World of Warcraft, or a worse example of some other game. or they were betting that their game was going to at least pull in 75% of World of Warcraft's numbers. Sure, it could, magically create 7 million consumers out of thin air. But with all that said, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out my upcoming book, Game Design Deep Dive Free to Play, where I'll be talking more about the design and methodology of the space as well as with mobile games. If you are new, do all the liking and subscribing. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.